Hello, we're going to be talking today about, in this video, two-point perspective. It's a kind of furtherance of the video we did on one-point perspective. Right now I'm kind of playing around a little bit with the horizon line, just in this case as well as in the other one. You can put the horizon line anywhere on your drawing. I would suggest about 2/3 up, kind of like that is right there. But remember, the horizon line, all that represents is your eye level. So generally speaking, you can put that anywhere in the drawing. It's just where you place the objects relative to that horizon line or your eye level that will dictate their position in space relative to your body or the viewer's body, the person who will be viewing the drawing, right, through your eyes. Well, two-point perspective is different than one-point perspective in that no plane that we'll be drawing will be facing us directly. So this is a scenario where any geometric form that you draw, none of the planes are facing you directly, i.e., no horizontal lines will be parallel with the top and bottom of the drawing. But you will still have vertical lines, and the vertical lines will just be that, vertical. So as you can see, I'm drawing two kind of planes going off into infinity here. And when you place your vanishing points on your paper, make sure you spread them out right to the very edges of the paper. And they're always the vanishing point is always on the horizon line. The idea of And again, I'm just kind of starting this drawing by building a cube, right? So instead of starting with the rectangle, I have to start with just one vertical line, as you noted with it when I started that drawing, just the front edge of the cube, where the two planes to come together. That's how you start a cube, just a single vertical line. Then you take a line from, the top and bottom of that back to the respective vanishing points to create these planes moving off into space, to infinity. And then another vertical line and another vertical line to end the plane, right? To make the cube finite. And then you're just kind of putting it together like you do a one-point scheme, except you're kind of crossing the lines, right? You're crossing over, and where they meet will be the back corners of the cube. Can kind of see that. So I drew the two front sides first, the bottom, and then you could draw the top, and then hopefully if you have everything right, that top back corner and the bottom back corner will be right above one another, and you can just kind of finish it off by putting a vertical line in there. Now, when you're doing this, you don't need to, again, you can just line your ruler up. You don't need to project these lines all the way back. I did it just to show you the principle in terms of the two-point scheme. So notice how the object, the cube, is no longer facing us directly, right? The planes moving to the right go to the right vanishing point. The planes moving to the left go to the left vanishing point. I still made it transparent, which is what I want you to do too as well. Perspective, linear perspective, is only useful in terms of geometric forms. So if we still lived in the woods in the wild and, we had no sense of geometry in our lives, just kind of random chaos in terms of trees and bushes and whatever, there'd be no reason for linear perspective, right? We would understand perspective in terms of things appearing small in the distance, right, and overlapping forms and that sort of thing. And maybe a little bit of, the higher things get up, the further back they go, that sort of kind of idea of space presentation. But linear perspective is kind of this artificial construct that is dependent upon geometry, i.e. parallel lines, parallel planes, in this case, in what we're going to be drawing here. So when you draw this, and I'll probably pop in that horizon line, there it is when I turn on the perspective feature here, it automatically comes on. And those lines for everything in the drawing, again, you could vary the You could have more than one. If each object was turned just a little bit, they would have their own set of 2 points along that horizon line. Now you see, I'm just kind of noting with those circles the various planes. 6 of them. A cube or box has 6 planes, so make sure you count those out when you make your boxes. If you're not counting 6 planes, something's wrong. So you literally have to go through the action of counting those out. Okay, so now I'm doing one above the horizon line, right? Like a floating cube, right? I start with just a vertical line. That's an error there. And I go to each respective vanishing point with that from that point, bottom point, right? And then the top point. So that's like an infinite wall, or in this case, a floating wall that is going to the vanishing points, right? But just putting a straight line down, I terminate it, right? I kind of define where I want that cube to end, right? And then I'll erase away. But notice there's no absolutely horizontal lines anymore, i.e. meaning parallel to the top and bottom of the paper. Every line you draw has to go to one or the other vanishing point. So you got to figure that out. It gets complex. But you only have 2 choices, right? Don't fudge it. Don't make it up. You got to take that ruler, the edge of that ruler right to that vanishing point, and on the same edge of that ruler, strike your mark up where the box is that you're drawing. So now I'm just kind of cleaning up those marks. And again, you don't have to draw a line all the way to the vanishing points. So my point is, in terms of the linear perspective, it is useful in so much as we live in a world of architecture, sidewalks, railroad tracks, whatever, it's all around us. The rooms we're in, parallel planes, the floor is parallel to the ceiling, et cetera, et cetera. We'll be doing a interior view probably next week. So, we'll talk about, how to draw interior of a room. So here I'm erasing away the lines that I don't need, leaving them in subtly. And I want you to leave them in subtly so I can see your work and that you got all 6 planes. So we're looking up underneath the box this time, right? So we can see that little diamond shape thing right there is kind of the plane underneath, right? Okay. And then the one on the bottom, one that's sitting on the ground, or we think it's sitting on the ground, I'm seeing the top of that plane. In 2-point perspective, generally speaking, you're going to see all 3 sides unless it's on the horizon line, like I'm doing right there. If it bisects the horizon line, your starting mark, technically, if it's an opaque box or an opaque cube, you're only going to see two of those planes, okay? The front and the side, or whatever, however you want to decide it or define it. Now, in this case, I'm going to make it transparent, right? So I'm going to kind of project all those lines back to the vanishing point. Or, that one anyways, right? So notice the top line of the left wall or the left plane goes down to the vanishing point, whereas the bottom line of the left plane on that one I'm working on right now goes up to the vanishing point, right? So that plane gets smaller. All the planes do, by the way. Get smaller as they move back in space. It's just that this one, the top line goes down, the bottom line goes up. Whereas the cube below your eye level, right? This cube I'm drawing right here is at eye level because I'm bisecting the horizon line. The first cube I drew is below eye level. So both lines on the left plane of that one, for instance, go up, but they both converge at that vanishing point, so the plane does get smaller as it moves back in space. If we didn't have kind of, generally speaking, architecture would be no reason for, linear perspective. Of course, if we didn't have architecture, we wouldn't have a rectangular piece of paper either, right, to draw on. So it's a product, it's a construct. Now, these are made-up drawings, right, and we'll do the interior view next week. That'll be a made-up drawing, but it does conform to what's happening in the world around you. So learning how to draw, do these made-up drawings using just this kind of artificial construct of two vanishing points. And it's random, I'm just kind of, you just spread them apart and you put them out there and you learn how, you're just kind of learning how to, what goes into, the world around you. If I saw a cube sitting on the desert, on the ground in the desert, it would look like that, right? So it's not divorced from reality. This is helping us see reality. Now what I'm doing there is I'm finding the center by putting an X in that plane, front plane of that cube, I'm finding the center of that cube. Then I'm striking a line straight up, and you'll see why here in a second. From the center of that plane. Okay, so I'm finding the middle of that plane. That gives me a point to project some. Those are random. Those aren't going to vanishing point. Those are just kind of up, they're acting as a peak of a roof, right, of an A-frame. So those are just kind of going up, meeting in the middle, right? So that line gave me the center point. Now that line goes to the vanishing point. That's the ridge of the roof, right? And then the other end of the roof, it just parallels that first angle I made, right? So you can see I kind of made popped a triangle on top of that plane and constructed a house form out of that, right? Pretty simple. So, you begin with the simple stuff and you move to the more complex stuff, of course, right? But again, what separates this from, on one point perspective, in terms of the concept, is that there's no plane in, none of the planes in the drawing are facing you directly, like that sheet of paper did, that 8.5 11 by 11 sheet of paper that we drew. The front edge of that was like parallel to your body, right? 2-point perspective, nothing's parallel to your body. So your body is turned relative to everything in the world, right? You're not looking at anything straight on. Now, these objects that I'm drawing are parallel to each other because they go to the same two sets of vanishing points. So they're all parallel to each other because I only have two vanishing points there. I could have more on there, like I said, vanishing points spread around there for each object, like 2 for each object. And they'd be, kind of skewed from one another a little bit. They wouldn't be kind of totally lined up with one another. And it gets complicated when you do that. But that's reality too, so it's the way it goes. So now I'm going to kind of try to connect all these. Again, like the 1-point drawing, if you want to kind of play around with building cubes in kind of step forms or something, you can do that. Or you can get a little more complex with it and try to, kind of create interlocking forms. Remember, though, I want you to always think about all sides of the cube. So for this one, I'm kind of creating a little step form. I know I'm stopping right there, right? I know that's where that cube is. And then I run a line along there. That's on the plane of that first cube I drew, right? So the backside of this new cube is the same plane as the front side of that first cube, right? They're smushed right up against one another. So I know they're connected, right? Because they have a line in common, which is that bottom line. The bottom of the front face of the first cube and the bottom of the back of the second cube are the same line. So I know that they're touching one another. Okay? So you've got to really know what's going on. You got to really kind of visualize the whole dimension of the space. You can't just draw the front of the cube. I see that happen all the time. So right there, I'm kind of demarcating the 6 sides of that cube I just drew, right? The bottom, top, and then the 4 smaller sides. So you should have 6 sides to every cube. And then erase away subtly. And I can get rid of that line right there. See, so that becomes all one big kind of L form now, right? But the lines are still there. They're just kind of, subtly erased away. And that's kind of the way I want your drawing to look. Now I'm going to build off of that. Can't remember where I went with this, but I think I wanted to connect this back to the house in some way. Oh, I think I'm making a little bigger form here. So another kind of jump up or another step up here. Now notice that overlaps the house a little bit. Don't be fearful of that. See how I'm kind of going to be hiding just the back corner of that house? That's cool. Look around you. The world's doing that all the time, right? So it's a boring drawing if you don't have forms overlapping one another. So if that happens in your drawing, go with it. It's okay. Makes it a little more complex to kind of navigate, but it's okay. Now look how narrow the top of these planes, or the top of each cube, is getting progressively. Why is that? Because it's getting closer to my eye level or the horizon line. If that top plane was at my eye level, at the horizon line, all it would be is one single line, right? I wouldn't see up underneath it, nor would I see on top of it. So realize that. I see a lot of that smaller cube, the top plane, a little bit less of the second cube, top plane, and that third cube, it's really foreshortened, right? It's really squished down. I don't see much of it at all. But yet I'm connecting all the corners, right? I'm making it a full cube. So, I can still do that. The only time I wouldn't do that is if that, that top of that box was right at the horizon line, because I wouldn't know where all the corners are, because it's just one line, right? So kind of a stepped form there. Now what happens is, technically speaking, you want to get those vanishing points out pretty far. When we do the interior, I have a technique that we can use to get our vanishing points out further past the sheet of paper. Because what happens is the forms start to look a little distorted, like a fisheye lens or something, like you're taking a picture of the fisheye lens, because generally speaking, vanishing points are not that close to the objects, in real life, but we're kind of making this drawing up, so it's okay. Now I'm going to see if I can connect it back to the house. How can I connect this kind of step form? It doesn't make sense. There's a house back there and there's this, kind of monolithic form up here. So I'm kind of taking the width of that thing and running it back, and it kind of fits perfectly up against that house, which is pretty, that doesn't happen a lot. The backside, right? So it's kind of like a sidewalk now going back to the house, right? Which is kind of cool. Now, nothing is flat, right? Everything has dimensions, so I got to kind of give a dimension to this sidewalk, right? Like it's made of concrete or something, right? So I'll make that into a thin little cube, right? A thin little slab. Just, come down just a little bit. I think the first time I did it, I went too far, but I'm projecting from the vanishing point to that thing. Yeah, it took me off the edge of the page, right? So that little line I took down there was too far. So just thinned it out a little bit. And that gave me room right there to, now I can get it all on the paper. And if it goes off, so what? Who cares, right? But I just want to kind of have this. So now that looks like a slab it's setting on, right? Problem is, the house now feels like it's floating a little bit, because that slab, I've reestablished the ground, kind of moved the ground down a little bit, if that makes any sense. See that? See, I kind of pop that down, and then I take that all the way across, and now I'm making a little foundation on the house, so I'm raising the house up to the level, back up to the level of the, we're lowering the house to the ground, let's put it that way, by adding a little foundation there, right, in keeping with the slab of the sidewalk. These subtle things are really hard to pick up on, so, when you're first learning to deal with perspective, you would probably miss that, right? You just let the house be. But the house has to feel like it's on the same level as the ground, right? So I just kind of threw a little bit of a slab around the house there, like a foundation or something, right? since I wanted it to be consistent with the sidewalk image here that I'm trying to create, I guess. Now I got to kind of finish the front off, right? So I got to bring that front down here. I don't know when I do it, but you notice that discrepancy there. That figure became a lot taller, right? Since I created that slab, right? I'm just putting a little door in there right now, kind of some implication of door in the house there, just kind of as a little way to finish off that idea of walking up to the house on this slab. But the front of these little this step unit here, notice how I have to kind of finish that off. The front, the front of it's still what it was to begin with, but the side of it I lowered, right? Kind of brought it down. So I got to kind of figure out, how to kind of make that more. I'm just kind of darkening these lines in now. So I think I'll do that right now, probably. Yeah, see that? So, and I'm projecting it up to that other vanishing point, right? I don't have to go all the way up there, but I have to go far enough that when I drop a straight line down, or a vertical line, all vertical lines are just that, vertical. You got to be very careful with those. It's very easy to start tilting those. And the moment you start doing that, none of the marks will match up. That's what gets students in trouble, is they're not able to see that the vertical line's not vertical. So, because you got all these angles going different directions, right? And then that starts to play tricks with your eye. And again, like I mentioned in the first video, step away from your drawing. If things get confusing, move away from your drawing. You'll see it for what it is after you, even if you get up, turn around, and look at it from a distance. Things start to come together. It's kind of odd. I don't know how that works or why it works that way. It's just allows you to see it from a different point of view, just by default of your body moving in space or something. So I'll probably get rid of that middle line there that I made as soon as I darken some things up here. Again, now I'm going to try to figure out how to connect that floating, we don't know where it is, right? It could be as far away as the house. It could be a huge floating cube in the way in the distance. Could be closer to us than the step unit. We haven't given it any sort of place yet because there's no relationship, has no relationship to the ground, right? So we got to kind of figure out how to kind of erase that mark out. We got to figure out how to kind of tie that into the rest of the drawing here, right? So what I'm doing is extending that unit out across the ground. Now I know where the ground is out there, right? The moment I projected that line out across the ground to the vanishing point, I know where the ground is. So then I project a vertical down from that box where they meet one another, gives me a place in space, right? And I'm going to draw kind of another little cube here supporting this one, right? Using the vanishing points. So just projecting a line out to the other vanishing point from this step unit and dropping a vertical gives a coordinate, right? A relationship between those two things. Otherwise, you're guessing, right? Again, look I'm drawing the whole cube, not, taking shortcuts here because I want to be able to understand the dimensionality of the space I'm creating. I'm kind of like creating space here, right? I'm kind of denoting now the the various sides of that new cube I did, just to kind of let you know. There's that little sliver up there that's underneath, right? That's number 5. And then the front that's facing us is, that one's 6. Okay, so 1's the bottom, 5's the top, 3, 2, 3, and 4 wrap around, and 6 is the front. So that form now is on the ground, right? Standing on the ground. Now what I'm doing is I'm going to connect those two with a kind of a small element, kind of little riser Again, I'm going in behind the steps so I can see what's going on. Don't guess. And I got to go down to the ground. And then there, see, so you got to visualize this stuff as transparencies, right? It just has to happen. It really lets you understand the space that's being created here. Like the novice wouldn't care about that stuff behind the first step unit here, right? I do, because I want to understand what's happening on the other side of those steps. So I'm going to make a full little cube there, right? A little platform cube. And then I just erase it away. Very, very important. Then I'll erase away all the other lines I don't need. And you'll see how the whole thing kind of connects together as an L form there. And I don't need that, the horizon line, I could get rid of that probably behind that unit. I don't know if I do or not. I think, yeah, see. So, because I want to make this kind of generally opaque now, right? Not transparent anymore. And I got that little line right there. Yeah, I got to kind of make that into one unit right there. Then I'll go in and, I think I put a little roof unit on this one too as well, just as kind of a little fun little kind of complement to the house, I guess. And I'll darken those lines up a little bit there as well. So we're getting kind of close to the end here. But just two moves you make to make these cubes. And again, you're going to want to take a shortcut, right? You're going to want to not draw all sides of the cube. Slow down. If you get 2 cubes done, that's fine. As long as I can see that you understood the dimension of those cubes and that you're using the vanishing points properly and the verticals properly. I mean, I'd like you to do a little bit more than that, but... And then, do some L forms or whatever if you can, but... And it could be this complicated. If you're good at this, you've done this before, kind of the sky's the limit in terms of this stuff. But start out with the cube. Everything's built on that cube form, on that box form. Now I'm finding the middle of that plane, right? Like I did at the house, so I can strike a line vertically. I don't have much room up there, but do a low little roof here on that. And then just, I'm just connecting the corners of that rectangle to the peak of the roof, right, to create the pitch of the kind of A-frame roof there that I'm making. Now I have enough room there that I can kind of probably see just a little sliver of the ridge of that roof there, and that goes all the way to the vanishing point, right? I just kind of drew that in just to show you. So the ridge goes all the way, and then I'll just parallel kind of that first angle I made, right? And then finish off the roof. Erase away that, I drew that ridge line too far, because I didn't know how far to go with it, so you always take a line a little bit too far than you need it and then erase it away. So I'll erase away that overhang line right there, see? And I'm just seeing just the tiniest little sliver of that roof, right? The top of the roof. So if you obey the rules here, it does some things that are really nice. Represents, kind of the way things really are. You don't always see the top of the roof. You don't always see a full roof. Sometimes you just see the thinnest little plane, right? I think I'm just going to kind of clean this up a little. I think I do one more small little move here before the end of the drawing, just to kind of balance things out compositionally. I'm just kind of darkening things up a bit. So, again with this one, HB or a 2H or something like that, pencil's good. Draw lightly to begin with a sense of precision. And then when you're sure of your lines, and you've kind of erased away the back lines of the cubes, you can darken things in a little bit, just to reiterate the forms and shapes. Yeah, I think I just bring a little one out here just to kind of complete the composition, because it feels a little empty on that side, right? So I think I come out with just a little. Little riser, a little kind of platform right there. So that's, now I'm drawing the back bottom edge of that, plane. See how I do that? I don't need to, but I want to, because I want to envision this whole cube in space, right? Now see how that's getting a little distorted there? The closer you get these forms to the vanishing point, right? It's getting over there near the vanishing point. Things start to warp a little bit. That's why those vanishing points should be off of the edge of the composition, technically speaking. And then you wouldn't get that sense of warping. But it's okay, it still works, It's like shooting, like I said, shooting, using a camera and shooting with a fisheye lens, which is a real wide angle lens. You get these distortions. And sometimes, it creates drama too, so it's not always a bad thing. Okay, so essentially the 2-point scheme, all that denotes is the fact that there's no plane in the drawing is facing you directly, right? 1-point scheme, one set of planes in a cube are facing you directly, and the rest of them are going off to that one vanishing point, right? So 1-point scheme, a set of horizontal edges that, edges that are parallel to the ground, are actually horizontal on the paper, right? Parallel to the top and bottom of the paper. And then the other ones go off to the vanishing point. 2-point scheme, you don't have any lines that are absolutely horizontal on your paper, meaning parallel to the top, to the top and bottom of the paper. But the verticals in both scenarios, in both schemes, are always vertical. So they're always absolutely parallel to the edge of the paper, right? The verticals to the two vertical edges. So if you're ever in doubt, kind of take a measurement from that mark you're trying to make and measure it over in two places to the edge of the paper, and you should get the same measurement, right? If it's parallel to the edge of the paper. This is kind of easy here, in this program, because the verticals are always just vertical, right? Once I lock into the perspective tool here. So that's, I'm getting kind of done with the piece here. So, but you can kind of keep going, endlessly on this stuff. And then we'll do, we'll use this 2-point scheme and actually create an interior room for the kind of last thing we do in terms of invented perspective here. Remember, this is invented, but it does echo what goes on in life, right? In the world around you, so it does reflect reality. Okay, I think that's about it. Thanks.